Hello.
Oh, hello. That was a
Mute.
weird connection thing there. Yes, Friday was good. Friday was very good. Did you get out of it what you needed?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was quite nice. Headphones.
Excellent.
It was nice for you to have kind of pushed us a little bit into putting it out there. Now it's in the world. So we're starting to well, to tell people about it and to work more on the project as well.
Deadlines make things happen. Oh, Jury's here and Mark.
Yes.
I'm just writing a sentence. Sorry, guys.
I enjoyed the demo on Friday.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed presenting.
It was really cool. I took quite a few screenshots. I couldn't keep up with it, but there's going to be really good things. So.
Sorry, I guess what I ended up doing, my idea was to, because, you know, obviously I've never shown anything to you guys, and also my background is kind of a mystery for now. So I just wanted to put a lot of discussion topics on the table so that, you know, we have things to talk about during the meetings, and you know where I'm coming from and all that stuff. Because I'm sure all of you know each other from all of the Future of Tech symposiums. You've met in person and you've known each other for quite a while. So I'm just getting here.
Yeah, in general, I think that's true, actually.
Good morning.
That's cool. Good morning.
Peter?
How are you?
Pretty good.
Good, good. I'm sorry, I was just distracted with the website. I'm doing a whole different layout thing. But anyway, I'm here. So a few things that we thought about discussing today. One of them is a timeline and view thing that Mark brought up. But I'd also like to show you something entirely different. This is something that can be done in my environment so far, but I'm thinking of adding a thing for a specific reason, and I think you guys must be absolutely the best community in the world to comment on it. So to go through it, and thank you, Mark, for having helped make this document a little less unreadable. Don't try to read what's on the screen here now. There's just some slides on some screenshots on the next page that I want to show you. So the thinking behind it is that obviously thinking with cards, as we saw on Friday, is a really good thing to do. However, many of these thinking with cards or thinking with units are really focused on just plopping things in. I think that some people feel overwhelmed in both Notion and Rome by just adding and then it gets a bit much. So having thought about this for quite literally years now, sitting at 4 o'clock in the morning in Singapore, having coffee at Starbucks in the middle of the street kind of thinking, the whole thing of in a graph view or other view, it can easily get cluttered there too. So what is the point of all this work? The point for some is purely to let them think for thinking and learning, grasping the information, and that horrible word sense making. That's fine, you know, but for a lot of people, you learn in order to have an outcome, generally a document. At least if you're an academic, at the end of the day, you hand in a document. Can we argue about the fact that it's PDF? Yes, but for now it is. So in Author, as you know, oh, by the way, this is a really important question. Do any of you have a Mac and you have not bought Author? Please, that would be really good if you do. No?
Huh? I have a Mac. What was the other one?
Oh, okay. If you have a Mac, your own or other in the office, and you have not bought Author, I would really appreciate it if you download it from the App Store. It's free, and then try to export. because it looks like the in-app purchase is having an issue. Anyway, we'll talk that afterwards. Just a bit of a side note. Sorry for the distraction.
Okay.
Right. So the thing is, one of the things Doug Engelbart was big on was the idea of glossaries. And we just call glossaries local definition or personal definitions. So how about this? When you are writing a document, things that are special to you, you would like to define. So that means you make a glossary entry. So in this environment now, we're raising glossaries to be something you could think of your main concepts, keywords. Not sure what to call it, but they are also glossaries. So we're using the word glossary. So in this environment also, the way you make a glossary entry, I'll just show you since it's all live here. Might as well use this document here. So let's say I want to define the word grasp. Just why not? Select it, Command G, type in a definition, give it a category if I want, give it a link if I want, and there it is. If something has been defined and I select it again, do Command G, there's the definition, so you can keep editing and refining it. On the reverse, we have this dynamic view. Here you can write anything, move it anywhere you want, and then if you do Option drag, you connect things. The point of this is to help you, and as Marcus pointed out, usually in the beginning of working on a project, just to get kind of a grip of where things are. There's no semantic meaning here. This is not semantic hypertext, just a space. But the key is, and I'm really getting to the conclusion, the bold stuff has glossary terms attached. So if you select one and do Command G here, you have the glossary term, same as on the other one. And you'll see that some of the terms, when you have selected them, are blue and some are yellow. The blue ones, if you double click, same as doing a find, they show you all the occurrences of that in the document. So it's really, the dynamic view is really connected to the rest of the document, as most of you know. So what I was thinking is, how about adding just two things? One, when you select in the dynamic view text that has a glossary entry, that is a glossary term, it automatically draws lines to any other glossary terms that it has in its definition.
Yes, brilliant. I love it.
Thank you. So the second part of that is, if you point to that text, it will show you the sentence.
Brilliant, sheer brilliance.
Peter, you're so welcome here. Now, finally, the reason that is important, click and point, because if you now click on NLS, not on Doug Engelbart, and then point to the line, you get a different sentence, because you get a sentence that is in the definition of NLS and how it refers to Doug.
That's really nice.
Thank you. The reason...
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. It's a work of art.
Oh, thank you. The reason for this, clearly some of you already, or well, all of you are already getting the point, but I had a problem with, let's say that boy loves girl, girl doesn't love boy, right? How do you graph that relationship? Boy loves girl, that's easy. But how do you do it from girl to boy? You can't do is not loving. If that girl doesn't know about the boy, you have nothing. So in an actual graph, a lot of human meaning cannot be reversed in that sense, right? So that's why here, the thing you click on is the one that specifies how it relates to everything else. And also because this is to help you think, it's not an automatic system, you can end up having really bad sentences like, he also invented NLS. It's not very elegant. So you may, in that case, select Doug Engelbart, do Command G and write it differently. Doug invented NLS. Do whatever you want. And then manually in this view, organize it based on that. And that's it.
So how do you create more than one relationship between things? Because I think I understood the from boy to girl, from girl to boy. What if it's, you know,
I can't show it to you now, but the thing is the basic, because we're doing some software updates, but the basic use of the glossary is when you export with Visual Meta to Reader. If you in Reader select any text and do Command F, you get all the lines that has that text, as you know. However, if that text is also a glossary entry term, at the top of the screen, you get the definition.
Okay.
But to answer your question, in that definition, if there are any other pieces of text that also has a glossary definition, it will be bold, so you can click on it. So that means that at the top of the screen, you can click around and follow any connection, and it's just a find. It's just is also there. So that means that in this dialogue, anytime you type anything which is also a glossary term, that's the connection. So if I write here, like, I've just written tiny, Raphael asked me about this, just a normal human sentence. If you are defined in a glossary term, that's enough.
Okay. Got it.
What happens
So
if we want to? What happens if we want to put a citation reference in a glossary entry?
Now you're just being really annoying. That means I have to spend more to make that happen, more coding time, because this is not a proper page like that. But I think that's a really important issue. We have to decide on a special field or allowing that to go in, because of course, how we manage citations is kind of crucial.
Right, while you're there, and just picking up on a thing I sent you, sorry to leap in, Jerry, but while it's on the screen, if you put something in the "this is an" box and then show us the glossary for that item, something that it made me think of something that Peter will be familiar with from Tinderbox is essentially you're making a strand of metadata. So if something is in
a what metadata?
Well, you're making a strand, you're making a line of metadata.
Okay,
so in other words, once you said this is a person, that's a term you might want to reuse. So it'd be useful to be a drop down, because what you're doing is you're basically incrementally formalizing a controlled vocabulary.
Yes.
And now, as you were talking about the relationships, I know this is sort of jam tomorrow because you've got a lot on your plate, and you're trying to sort of get people to take things up rather than spend on new things. But it occurred to me it's another thing you could leverage in your graph, because if you had some way to to say command, control click on something and click its type, and then you'd link to all the things of a similar type. In other words, you've got the information there. It's just a thing probably of just at this stage, if nothing else, not developing in such a way that you couldn't leverage that at a later date. Because I think this is something that's come to me a lot recently, and a couple of things going on in the Tinderbox community, and sort of one of the things noticed in getting people into deeper use of noting devices is that once they start to understand when you see a relationship, is to encapsulate it in some way, and whatever tool you're using it, whether you draw a line or you make a note that has a specific meaning, and this gets you out of the trap of always having to use a sort of whole scope word search, which invariably comes up short, especially when you have words that have multiple meanings in general use. Because a lot of the current cleverness just can't cope with the human semantic differences to that at this point. It'll get better, but not at the moment. So exactly. So you might be able to then, when you're in your view, you might be able to click the glossary term for this, and maybe then find all the paratexts in your view. Anyway, an idea for later.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that the nerds that we are get excited by. So first of all, the entry has to be nice. So either autocomplete or little buttons you can choose, previous or suggestions. All of that has to be considered. I absolutely agree. When it comes to how you use them later on, that is completely unknown by me at this point.
Sure.
Because it's a huge separate issue. All we're trying to do now is make it so easy and unintimidating for people to start playing with?
Yeah, sure. For what it's worth, you could always talk to Mark Bernstein. I mean, I don't know how he does it, but in there, any field of a note, as it were, or what Tinderbox calls attributes, anything that has the value. So, like if you got a string attribute, when you're editing it, there's a little pop-up list you can click that shows all the discrete values used across the whole lot, and that's done on the fly. And actually, another further thing it's done is you can actually put in suggested values that appear in the list, but when you're actually doing any manipulation based on the uses of it, if that suggested term has not been used, then it doesn't show through. I only mention that because you may have code ideas that might be of help to you. That's all.
I think that really wraps into what we're going to talk about next. But Jerry, did you have something else to on this topic?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One thing that I've been playing with propositional trails, the kind that you said, okay, so how do you go the other way around? And okay.
It's okay. It's not always easy to work from home, that's for sure. We'll just wave when it's a good time to come back. So Mark did an interesting timeline view of the timeline of the history of text thing that we're playing with. So that we'll talk about in a minute, just to inspire all of us to think about views, because it's a sexy thing. So I was just wondering, in that little category box, if you write 1152, you know, what that could be then a year.
Yeah.
Right. So we have that go over. So the thing that, bizarrely enough, my wife and I talked about when we're driving across the entire country of Cyprus one time, she was driving, it was scary, was tagging tags, which is pretty much related to this, right? So, you know, what's the most user interface efficient way we can say, you know, what a number is, for instance?
I think a couple months ago, I sent you an email, Frode, and I think it connects with what you're showing now for the glossary. I sent a screenshot on chat. This shows on Calibre, if you open an EPUB, you can go to analyze the EPUB and it'll tell you how many times each word has been used. And it would be great if we had some sort of very low level, you know, not even machine learning, just organizing the words into different categories, you know, what are verbs, what are adjectives and things like that. And then from that, we would also be able to discover people's names and already have a list of those names and the words and like a small knowledge graph of things that contain in the book.
Yeah, so that's a good one. In author now, sorry, I forgot I wasn't sharing. I just want to show you this. So this is a, that's funny, weird version of a document. I just, hang on, again. Oh, okay, so this was my upgrade paper. If I want to, I can go to Command-Shift-N, and it shows all the names in the document. So that's the first step in what you're talking about. It's primitive.
Yes.
You're talking about something much more, but it is here. So it also, because we're experimenting, shows any bold text. But it's, you know, it's kind of an interesting.
I sort of prefer this. Sorry, Raphael.
No, and I love this area that you showed also before, that it's very quick for you to find people, navigate and see other places that that name has been mentioned. I found it's quite fast and I like it.
Yeah, speed is crucial. You know, Doug made this analogy of, you know, skiing down a hill. You can't, if it's not instant, you can't do it. You know, documents, Command D, every time PDF, boom, boom, right? It has to be absolutely instant. So you have to work at the speed of thought, right?
An interesting thing that occurred to me, so pondering on this and from a sort of wider scope, is the fact that to what extent, if we sort of embrace this thing, this moves us from past things. So in order to have the affordance of something, you sort of need to be more careful about the naming. If you're used to using, 6 different spellings of a name for one person, which the kind of thing that we do quite rapidly. Well, classically, for instance, sort of English speakers tend to ignore accents because they have no meaning in English, so it doesn't really bother them. But actually, if you want to show someone's name correctly and has an accent, you should have an accent on it, even if I don't use it. But it sort of means that probably one of the things that we'll learn to do, and I don't think that's bad, that we probably don't do at the moment, is to be more precise and, funnily enough, in our sort of terminology. Names is perhaps a bad example, but I hope that sort of comes across, because if we are organized like that, then we get to leverage all these really cool features. Otherwise, there's an extra layer of work has to be done by the computer to sort of guess what we meant in order to do what we asked it to do.
One interesting wrinkle that you should have a look at is how the knowledge LaTeX package addressed wanting to have different contexts in which the same term could appear. So they basically made sure that there was a mechanism so that if you were jumping into some subfield of mathematics, you could redefine the term. And if you selected the glossary entry within that region of the document, you'd get the customized version of the glossary entry. But if you clicked on in a general discussion, the glossary entry that would come up for it would be the generic definition of the term as opposed to the specialty definition. So I don't know if we want to try to bring that wrinkle in at some point, but I think it'd be very valuable, at least for people doing highly technical writing where they have to deal with overloaded terminology a lot.
I think we've done that in the sense that select text and use liquid. You can look it up anywhere. The glossary is only, when I use the example usually of you read a novel and you come across a character and you forgot who that character is, and you think, okay, well, that character was introduced somewhere. Select the name of that, do Command F and read the first sentence it appears in. That's a quick way to do that. So that's the logic of, oh, what's this term? I want to see it. And then you just by surprise in the beginning, you get the glossary on top. Because if you want to look it up in a specific thing, you do a different command. You use liquid to Wikipedia, dictionary, whatever. So different ways to reach in for different kinds of information. I'm very wary of kind of trying to pre-guess or provide an information sheet in the way that was so special in the Web 2.0 days, remember?
But to a certain extent, we've already discussed a mechanism that could achieve, not today, but in due course, what Peter's talking about, because in a sense, it's just another piece of metadata on the glossary item. Because really what you're doing is you're saying, I want the glossary, but I don't want a glossary term if it doesn't have this value on it. So if you had 2 definitions of the word maths, you basically have a mechanism and you'd be calling that, but you'd be putting an extra filter on it without diving into the technicalities. And clearly that's not there today and it'd be more work, but there's nothing you're doing at the moment that I think argues against, building into such things in the future.
What I am doing that argues against it is, of course, the entry point for new people. However, what you guys, especially you, Mark, and you, Peter, are very interested in that side of the hypertext community would be incredible to have in a advanced button kind of a thing. And what can be done there would be absolutely incredible. But I think we have to discriminate between the different kinds of users.
Yeah, and my experience of doing a startup also means that it's terribly easy to think, oh, we need this as well. And sometimes you just got to get something out of the door.
Same advice as
I agree.
And again is focus.
Yeah, I have like a big list of that, of like an options screen where people could kind of create their own interface and adapt to users' needs. Cool. I find that very, very useful, but it gets complex very fast of having too many options and selections, and then it just confuses people.
Actually, it's funny. I mean, I reflecting on it, actually, in a sense, the more sort of versed your audience are in the general tool you're using it, the more likely it is that what you get when you ask for comment is a list of things that you don't have and really, really ought to have, rather than a more naive audience who will say, I absolutely love this feature. You know, I've never seen this before. This works for me, because to a certain extent, after a point, it's so obvious because you know how it works that it loses that magic.
But I totally agree that it's nice to have a little bit harder to reach preference panel where you can give advanced users more functionality and more control over the program you made. Because I mean, if we think about groups of users, it's always going to be like 70% basic users, and then maybe like 20% intermediate users, and 10% advanced users, like broadly, right? So it's you need them all, because the advanced users usually are the ones that are creating the most content, and the basic users are the ones that are just consuming content. So it's always a balancing act.
It's an incredible balancing act, and I think we have to learn from things like video editing and picture editing. Photoshop and Final Cut are incredibly complex pieces of work, but of course they have grown over time, and if they don't have the complexity, you can't do the complex things you need to do. But to have the going across, I mean, iMovie, what piece of rubbish that is. Has nothing to do with Final Cut. It's just, you're learning to play tennis in a box. It's just so stupid. But yeah, it's a very, very difficult issue. And so maybe there should be two different applications almost. I mean, Doug was very interested in having different levels of user engagement as they could, they could learn more and more commands. But we don't have a command set interface, so it's harder for us to hide the more advanced commands. Boy, oh boy, it's important.
It's also in terms of shortcuts, is this thing that, so I've learned, and it's sort of not well documented anywhere, but, the first app in any OS session that decides it wants a shortcut gets it. So if you're if your app opens later, it doesn't matter how well you know that thing, if something else has
or
done
if you're Adobe and you want to go against the grain just because you want to show you're cool.
One of their...
Jerry's back.
Yes. Sorry about that. I hope it's okay. This is just such an exciting topic. So I really want to jump in. I'm old enough to be very young when Emacs came out. And 25 years later, I learned that Emacs was really just NLS, the command line. That's all it had. And it basically had this Emacs was basically designed Angabartian terms. It basically said, okay, teach you some commands and you can type it in, you got command completion, everything, and you learn progressively. Now, the good news is that VS Code, I don't know whether any of you know this, VS Code is 100% Emacs, just really nicely laid out. So if you look at how it is built, the logic is exactly that. And of course, they did one other things very well, which is the basic functions that a programmer needs to do is beautifully laid out for you to begin with. But it got extension and everything. And the other thing I want to say is that within this sort of knowledge management community or sense making or network thinking that I'm steeped in, everybody is ready for an Emacs-like interface. Everybody wants power interface.
It's funny how DOS came in the middle, and DOS looks like it's the same thing, but it has absolutely nothing in common with it. It's arbitrary weirdness.
Exactly. But the point is, the real hope is that the original vision can actually now recreate it. You don't need to build tricycles, because people are actually, I follow these people, and they're young people, 19, whatever, and they just get 100% what Angabart is talking about, okay? So it's a real sea change that the young generation gets so frustrated with what's going on that they actually discover. I mean, I had a PhD in computing, but I didn't know about Angabart. I mean, that's scandalous.
Yeah.
And now 16 years old know who Engelbart is. Sorry, it took 50 years.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw someone do the
just-
history of interactive computing on Twitter yesterday, and it's like, maybe you should look up NLS. And they did and said, oh, this looks like a horrible thing to launch nuclear weapons. Like, maybe you should look at this demo. Oh my goodness.
Yes, so
Yeah,
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because of that. And just one other thing, that this whole idea of flow is that's what you after too, Frode. The most important thing is when you work on the text, your attention is sacred. You really should have no distraction. You should be able to, and that's I actually stolen all your ideas, Frode. I made glossary, just the trademark gloss, as you can put a gloss anywhere, and the system will resolve, and if you like, it'll hide it for you or whatever. So I mean that really is the most, and the other thing that I think is just two more things. One is that you write about that it's actually implementation terms, it's easy. If you really need to have just one editor of your things and reuse it, I mean, it's ridiculous that you got a special editor for glossary where you really need to figure out how you can reuse your parts of your editors. You know
yeah, absolutely.
And
by the way,
yeah.
I don't know if you saw me looking distracted there. I just tweeted the quote from you, your attention is sacred.
I mean, that's the best thing I heard for a long time.
Yes.
Because this is Fuller, you know, the rebel wisdom guy. And it just blew my mind, because that really says what's wrong today. Because it isn't.
Gunter's here too. Hello, Gunter.
You know, another thought that just came to mind is
Hi there.
So sorry, Peter.
Okay, so another thought that came to mind is that lots of times I like to explicitly indicate those context shifts in my writing. So I'll say, you know, partition in a game theoretical sense. Now, maybe author could recognize if a term that has a glossary entry had right after that set off by commas in a whatever domain, fill in the blank sense as a linguistic pattern in the document, and then use that to select which glossary entry to pop up.
Oh, sorry, Gunther.
Then you wouldn't even necessarily need the user interface so much. Let the actual original document text with some linguistic conventions be the interface instead of having a custom dialog box.
Sorry, Gunther, you just described what trail marks is. It's just that little notational thing that you can introduce at any point, and it will get interpreted according to the context. And I hope to do you a demo next week sometime. That's exactly the idea of, it took me years to discover that all you need is that notational device, which basically enables you to play this game. And you should be able to just say hyphen your mark, colon, and the subject, object, whatever, if you need to, or not, and just say, and behind, underneath you elaborate whatever you want. And just that move enables you to play exactly that game. And I hope everybody gonna steal that idea. Yes.
Yeah,
I connect with what Jerry said, that he only found out about Doug Engelbart a lot later. And I found out about HyperCard in July 22nd, 2 years ago, in 2019. So, I mean, I keep wondering how many more things and projects and people that I don't know about that could be extremely useful. So
Hypothesis got a spreadsheet of 37 knowledge management things, which tried to do annotation on the web and failed. 37.
That's awesome. Yeah.
There was a in the late 80s, there was a DOS program which did bi-directional links and everything, and it was even successful, and it was bought out just to be shut down.
Because, for example, HyperCard was extremely successful. There was a huge community, everybody loved it, but the timing was horrible because they released it just before the web. So nothing was made for the web. So it got stuck without having web, so it never evolved. So Apple just, you know, gave up development on it. But I'm like, what would have happened if the timing would have been like 2 years later, right? Or a couple years later. So that's why I'm extremely curious to know like what books are in your libraries and the people you've been reading and all those sorts of things, so that I can add and find out
It's sad
more.
that Doug, I mean, the only Doug really, but about Doug is bootstrapping, and I don't think it's actually that helpful. It's sad, it is quite difficult to find sort of, in a sense, a good story that isn't either an academic paper or, you know, the reference or part of something else that actually covers it. NLS appears in the edge of all sorts of books about that period when he was working. It's actually a bit the same, funny enough, with some of Ted's early work and, you know, HES and FRES and those sort of things. I guess the answer is, yeah, there's a job for somebody to get right about this stuff, because we lost Doug already, and Ted, you know, is getting on a bit as well.
I did do a documentary on Doug with him, of course, invisiblerevolution.net, and we have a video playlist. It's very much more about the human. I think that just reading, first of all, of course, his 62 paper, and then, of course, rewatching the demo, and then finally, authorship provisions and augment says almost all of it. You know, the organizational stuff is something that I would like to see very much about networked improvement communities. And of course, the whole point of visual meta is to enable that, you know, so we can have that kind of sharing. You know, he wanted X-files. Visual meta is an X-file. You know, there are many, many other things we haven't done. And it goes back to the cards thing, you know, and very nice to see Raphael doing the work he showed us on Friday. We have to have units of knowledge that are transferable between environments. And I'm expecting Jury to do another 2 thumbs up on that one. Because, you know, if we can't share our knowledge in a contextual manner, then it's a bit superficial, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
Frode, I actually discovered your work through the Invisible Revolution. That was my sort of, I mean, apart from, I learned about Engelbart as such from, I think it was Douglas Crockford on the JavaScript, the good parts, had an introductory video where he talked about Engelbart.
That's so cool.
Because he described himself as I'm a software archaeologist, and I find that all the great ideas were there 50 years before us.
Yes, I agree.
It's so strange, and it really illustrates part of the point. The Invisible Revolution was, you know, we uploaded the videos, quite small. It's all we could afford bandwidth-wise. And it didn't take that well. And we're also listed on the QuickTime, this is great, you have to view it site. You know, Apple was that small, QuickTime was that small, hardly any video on the web. It's not that long ago. And then just a few years later, all the video stopped being playable on a Mac.
Yeah,
so, you know,
I was about to ask you that. How can I watch this?
It's crazy.
Watch it.
Yeah. I mean, it's on that playlist on YouTube. That's it. And you know, there is more, but yeah. Anyway.
I sent some stuff to Raphael that there's a whole lot of stuff that mainly ended up in the appendices to my thesis, because I discovered that no one seems to care about the appendices, and I thought of all the stuff I collected together that otherwise would just sit on my Joshua and go nowhere. But so there's quite a bit about early systems, and you can mine in from there.
Cheers.
Talking of which,
I mean, sorry for just one sentence. It was you had a link to, or you hosted the 2003 whatever Singapore paper by Engelbart, which has that line. You know, he said, "Oh, Doug, be patient." And he said, "I've been patient for 50 years. Clearly, there's a systematic bias against collective IQ. Period." That's actually written in that paper.
okay, so my comment on that would be 2 things, actually, important things. One is, if you look at society like an organism, and you compare it with a human organism, how can society know whether we are a cancer or we will get to the next level, right? I'm not saying these words easily. I've lost people to cancer. But if you look at it as a body, we're trying to change how we do communication. That's a really big thing. So there will be a huge collective weight against what we do. It has to be. Otherwise, culture, body would just spin out of control. So once we know and accept that, at least we can move on. And then one other more personal thing. Mark told me yesterday about someone who has issues with imposter syndrome. And, you know, I'm sure most of us here have had some of it at some point. I certainly know I do.
Mhm.
But the thing about imposter syndrome is it's, of course, bullshit, because if you're just trying to be a showman and be rich, fine. You're an imposter, you get a slap in the face, whatever. If you're trying to do a trick you can't do. But if you're genuinely trying to do something good, there is no such thing. But I once had to tell a friend who was a bit unable to speak up on these issues and very quiet, both in voice and other ways, that I said, look, you're worried that if you talk about this loudly, people will say, well, who the hell are you? And he said, yes. And I said, you know, it doesn't actually matter, because it is what you're trying to do. Do you know who that friend was? That was Doug. The most impactful person in human-computer interaction felt he was an imposter, felt that people would say, who the hell are you? Even with his track record. But I honestly think that being hammered this, I told him many times, did actually help him somewhat, but it's crazy. Crazy. Anyway, do you want to do a screen share maybe, Mark? Is that maybe?
Yeah, that's sure. Screen share. Find the right thing.
I'm also going to give you an export of this. Nope.
Hopefully. Right, let me just embiggen this a bit. All you're seeing here is I took the timeline. I took basically the text out of the, I can't remember whether I took the text or the visual meta, it doesn't really matter. I took it from Feature Text Book and fiddled around in BB Edit for a bit. And then I imported it into an application called Eon Timeline, mainly because it's one of the few things that does a nice HTML5 timeline. That's what you're looking at here. It has all the usual timeline problems in the information's lumpy, and it can't do things like I'm done with Simile Timeline, where you can have a different zoom level as you move along the timeline, which is kind of obvious after the fact, but very few tools do it. And in fairness to Eon Timeline, this is just the export out from their rather nice app. The sad thing is this is about to be discontinued because their app's got a lot richer, and the dev said it's coming back. But anyhow, and if you're doing a lot of timeline work, I can recommend taking a look at Eon Timeline, which came out of the Scrivener community because authors wanted to do timelining and tracking character paths and story arc and things like that. So all I've done here is I basically got each entry. And one of the things I was thinking about was starting to perhaps use color as a metadata, rather to be discussing earlier with types of glossary thing. And I was trying to think about, okay, what are the major sort of structural lines across the contributions we have to the text, without being, I'm not trying to be sort of very exclusive in groupings, but I'm thinking about, there are some people who are thinking about the meaning of the text. There are some people who are thinking about the rendering of the text in terms of typefaces. There are people who are thinking about the technology of the text, and all sorts of things like this. And I was partly, I don't know if anyone's come across this, Info We Trust, just one of many DataViz books, but it has a rather cool feature at the back. It's got a selected bibliography, and I don't know if you can see this, but the little color code at the top. But if you can see on this end, there's a little color dot by each thing. So actually, as you're reading through the bibliography, once you've got the hang of the colors, you sort of know what they are. One of the things I was thinking I may play around, now I've got this data set in a form I can work on it more easily, I might see about whether that gave us anything useful. And I've really just done this not for any particular reason or because of this particular tool. It's just I was trying to get the timeline in a in a form that I could have more interactivity with it and see it as a time, which is sort of harder to do on the page, which is no reflection on the book, and it's, you know, and the medium is what it is, and you can't do this in a book. Well, of course, if we go down the line of sort of like our book down or Jupyter notebooks, perhaps, but I think that's something for down the line. And I'm trying to avoid the technology driving the process. This is, to me, more about the sense making of what's here. Because I think one thing that came to me
You
is
really say sense making? Oh,
the making of what? I wasn't actually meaning it really in the terms that some people use it as a sort of as a label. I was just meaning in the literal sense of making sense. But it did occur to me that, and this is drawing again on my experience in sort of tinderbox work and things, is even just simple things like, you know, simple metadata like color can be quite useful as a way of getting in, because once you realize you're interested in blue things, it's quite easy to go and look for all the other blue things without having to really worry about understanding other things. So if I was to come across the future of text and think, oh, I'm really quite interested in this strand of it. I'm a typographer, you know, where's more stuff about this? And either I may find stuff I didn't know, or I may find the stuff I know that I could contribute. So it cuts both ways around. But it's nothing special as such. But the URL is in the sidebar, and, you know, feel free. I probably will keep updating this and putting a bit more info in it. But I just would add that there's nothing special. I just used this because I could and it worked, and it gives me something to play with. Other tools are there, and I've no special feelings about, you know, what one should use for a timeline.
yeah, I greatly appreciate this experiment. I mean, one thing that, you know, as you know, all of you, Doug was very interested in color. So you would color different glossary terms, and you could skim through a document and instantly see what different bits are. And, you know, you talked earlier, Raphael, about a bit of parsing. You should be able to have a normal document and click a button and it'll remove anything that doesn't have a date next to it. And put it in chronological order, but also do basic things like in 1912, the king went to Denmark, and in the next sentence, he then went to Sweden. You know, basic processing should have both of those retained and so on. So
I agree.
There's a lot of cool stuff we can do.
This timeline, I just wanted to quickly connect with
that one, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So this idea of having different colors for different topics and categories is great. I love it. And seeing the content that would be there, I guess it would connect with you, Frode. You were asking me people to be part of the next book, and I know a lot of people from typography and from the history of typography and type design and letterpress and all those things. And I feel like this timeline would be like the perfect place for them to collaborate more fully. And then I would just wondering, it would also be nice to have there the history of encyclopedias as well, because it's completely related to text and to knowledge. And I would love to see how some things end up matching of different encyclopedias.
It's interesting you say that, because it occurs to me this is another way. This is quite an easy way. You can look at this and feel instantly outraged that the thing that is most central to you about text is not represented here. I mean, not everything ties to a date. It has to be, we have to be fair about that. But there are lots of things we can just say, wait a minute, there is a whole strand of, you know, the precursor to our current conversation that's missing. So that's another way that timelines can help.
I'm very interested. I even did something, I don't know if I can find it right now, but I did a little timeline of, you know, the history of knowledge, and it had all those encyclopedias and things. And I'm very curious to know who was contemporary of who. For example, Arthur Mee was alive the same time Nikola Tesla was alive, and was alive the same time some other person was alive. So how did those ideas permeate and exchange in order for things to come alive, right? I mean, people were reading each other's papers. So you had these people influencing other people. And I would love to see those connections from the past, because there's a lot of insight that can come from that.
I'll show you one other time. It's one other thing that people might find interesting. I'm amazed this doesn't. I don't know if people have seen this, which is a lovely thing somebody did actually quite some while ago. It's a mashup of the history of King John of England using simile timeline on the top left. And as we go about, we should see, it's obviously broke. Oh no, here we go. And as he goes through his reign, I'll go back. We actually see, because during his entire reign, he never stayed in one place, for more than a couple of days. So it's a nice mashup between timeline and, for instance, geographical information. It's all broken because Google decided to not be helpful to people who wanted to use mapping information. Similarly, timeline is now an abandoned bit of software, but I still think it's a really super idea.
Really is. Well, this is the kind of multi-dimensional stuff that a knowledge unit, whether we call it a glossary or whatever, should be able to link to and make live. But by the way, important to mention, Edgar just came back. He's just been to his first ballet lesson.
Yeah.
And he was talking about standing on his tippy toes just now. And of course, ballet and other sports is what we're inspired by, right? Giving people the freedom of movement. So, sorry, Jerry, what are you showing?
Are you muted? Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, this is a book by Charles Simonis, the space tourist, Microsoft CTO. His father wrote this. Because after in the early 60s, for political reason, he was a professor of electrical engineering, and so he wrote this cultural history of physics, and this is now available in English. Now, if you want to see something beautifully laid out with timelines, anything, photographs, this is the best, most beautifully produced book with real love for humanity, through physics.
Is there a link to where we could sort of find
a cultural history of physics? Okay. You can buy it. It's very expensive, but I mean, this is what they translated it to English, and I think about 10 years ago, wherever it was released, and so it's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Just the timeline. It's hard. Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to share this little story that connects with what Jerry was saying, that there was like 37 different annotation softwares that didn't make it, that failed, right? And let me share my screen really quickly. You can see here, this is the keyboard layout, QWERTY versus Dvorak. And when typewriters were popular, the problem with typewriters is that people were typing too fast, and then the keys would stick on one another. So then they had to move the keys around to reduce people's speed in typing, right? And then Dvorak comes along and develops, he does a study on how the keys should be organized so that you could optimize the typing speed for people. Because once we had the transition from typewriters to keyboards, we didn't have that limitation anymore. But you couldn't train a whole fleet of secretaries anymore, and people already had the knowledge to use this weird keyboard. So now you have a bunch of people typing non-optimally in a keyboard that is standard. And how do you change a standard? It's really, really hard to change a standard because people are already using it. And then there's this really nice website called dvzine.org. And it tells the story of the keyboard and his frustration on developing this organized layout. So it kind of has to do as well with once you implement a standard and the standard becomes famous or popular or widespread, it's extremely hard to change it. So like, what are the chances of building a new web from scratch that people would use? Like, I think it's extremely low, very, very slim, because people are already used to it. We've spent years and years to introduce people to different topics and different tools, and people started using, and it's just hard to change.
I think we're at a very good stage in the history of computing now with that, because people have learned keyboard shortcuts, but we can start now subverting them, which of course is, very different from that. But for instance, Command F to find is implemented in a very clunky way in one environment. We can still refine it, but we still do the Command F. So, to try to build on standards is really, really tricky. I mean, yeah, the Dwark keyboard issue is, of course, a very big warning from history.
Have you guys seen the quick navigations that have been showing up in a bunch of different programs using Command K?
Hang on, let's have a look at this. I just wanted to show you. So this is in Reader. This is the book. Keyboard, Command F. So now you can instantly see where else in the document it refers to keyword. Right, so to use it in a timeline is pretty useful. Here is the entire history of spam as we have it now.
Yeah, I love how fast that is. It's so nice.
Yeah, because it's doing very little, and now we have the history of IBM.
What's the largest document, and this isn't a loaded question, I should say. I mean, what's the largest document you've sort of made in Author so far? Or longest?
I don't know, but considering modern machinery, as long as it doesn't have a huge amount of images, I think it can be. Yeah,
that wasn't a sort of it wasn't a negatively loaded question. I was thinking the interesting thing is to start to look at these at scale. I mean, I seem to have far too many projects on the go. One thought had been actually to take my thesis, only because it's a long document I know reasonably well, and not all of it can go into Author, and that doesn't really matter. What I wanted to do is take the bits that could go into Author, i.e. supporting the features it has, and just see and I'm not worried about pictures and this kind of thing, but just see, taking a large bit of text designed as a single piece and seeing what it does, so we can play with these really cool features at a sort of, deeper level, when you're going to get back, 100 answers rather than 10. And we will doubtless discover things, but it's all part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be fun. I see Raphael has put this pitch thing. Could you talk us through it? I mean, when you talk about gaming, yes, my ears get very hot.
Let me show what I mean. This is the program I used to make my presentation on last Friday. It's a program called Pitch. And I've been using Keynote for 10 years. And then once they came out, they totally subverted the idea of presentations and they made it extremely useful. So for example, if I click here on this little thunderbolt, it shows the quick menu, but I can bring this quick menu at any time by pressing Command K. And then if I press N on the keyboard, it creates a new slide. And then, for example, the whole logic of this keyboard shortcuts in Pitch is that your left hand stays on the keyboard and your right hand stays on the mouse. So you're constantly using both hands to do shortcuts and to put things on screen. So for me to type Command K, I have to use both hands, right? But if I want a shape starts with an S. So if I press S, it already gives me all of the shortcuts for all of the different shapes. So I'm using my left hand to press S. Now I can use my mouse to select which shape I want. And then if I want to create another shape, I just press S on my left hand and I click with my right hand. And then I can create these different shapes on the screen. Right? So now I have 3 different shapes. And then if I want to align these, I can press Command K and I put align, and then I can either use the keyboard to go up and down, or I can use the mouse to select which one I want. But it has some smart features, like if I press spacebar, it's going to automatically align like one next to the other and distribute it. If I bring this square over to the right and select these 3 elements and press space, it's going to distribute them on the line because it understands that I'm trying to organize these elements. And there's all sorts of things that I can do in the quick menu. And it's always combining left hand and right hand. So if I want to assign this to somebody as, for example, I would love somebody in my team to work on this slide. I can press A on my left hand, and it's going to bring me the assign to, and then I can click with my mouse hand, my right hand, to, for example, Davi. So I get a little bubble here on the left side that shows that it's assigned to Davi. And I can also do status and put the slide status to do, so that I know that somebody has to work on this. So
Hang on, so you do Command K and then A, or do you just do A?
I can do A for assign.
Without, so as
But-
long as you have nothing selected, you can just do the
Correct.
key. Okay.
Yes. So the way the logic is that they removed a lot of the control and command and option keys, and they simplified it so that you have one option K, the command K, to bring up the menu, and then all of the other simpler shortcuts are just one letter keys, combining with the mouse to select. So I thought it was a very nice way of doing shortcuts.
I think that's super nice, but since you're talking about one key shortcuts, just wanted to briefly show, you can see the screen now, right?
Yes.
So this is, of course, and not all of you know Liquid. So anywhere I am, command space, boom.
Yes.
Right, so it's the
great.
same kind of logic. So I think what they've done there is really interesting, because you are also doing it from a create perspective rather than
Yeah.
a find perspective.
So in author, for example, you said to use command F to find,
Yeah,
but is the F being used all by itself? Because you could just have F to find instead of command.
no, cannot, because then you will be typing. Remember, author is for typing.
Oh, right.
So we're leveraging the what people are used to. We here in Reader, we could do that, but you know, for some things, I think N we have, which doesn't work in this particular document, but yeah, it is to try to make it the same as well. You know, there was this whole thing about mode less being a good thing. I think mode is good, because reading and writing are not the same thing. And you have to make a decision at some point to publish, I think is important, something that Google Docs doesn't really appreciate. So to try to have the commands be the same is interesting. Like here, we can do just H to highlight, but that's a bit useless because you can't do that here. Here, you can Shift H. So I try to support both where I can. And we're, you know, going a little bit back and forth on that.
Also, two-finger typist is all a bit moot to me.
Sorry, yeah, Jerry?
Yes, Mark, I just want, can I share my screen for a minute? I think this is it. Yes, hopefully it will work. You talked about the size of things. Now, this is the audio notes I took over the last 3 months. This is 228 pages when it's printed in PDF, but we have to wait 4 minutes for it to do it. But that's the beauty of the browser. It's just so powerful, you know, and it's okay, it's got some full screen screenshots in it. So eventually it will slow down sometimes for that, but it's just incredible. Look at that. And this is 230 pages of all everything I wrote in the last couple of months. I mean, so the browser is just super powerful nowadays. Amazing. That's all I wanted to show. Yes.
It's a good point. A lot of the infrastructure, oh yeah, let's go through your bank statement there. A lot of the infrastructures we have are incredibly powerful, but of course we need to twist them into being more useful.
Exactly. And got to tame the broken wheel, the browser. You know, it's got good parts. Yes.
Exactly. We have to wrap up soon. We're over time already, but this was such an engaging chat. Peter, virtual key, good. With Liquid, but I've been, I want to repeat the earlier question. If any of you have access to a Mac which has an account that has not bought Author, maybe friend, sister, lover, parent, pet, whatever, please download Author for free and try to export. I need to know if in-app purchase works or not. It's really hard to test.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll test on my second account on my other Mac, and then I'll send you a tweet on it or an email.
That would be really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you could actually, when you've downloaded it and you go to export, if you can start doing a screen share before that, so I can see exactly the right sequence of dialog boxes, because we spent way too much dev time on this, and
Sure.
we have actual features to build, you know.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. I look forward to
okay.
Friday. And first,
We got a call tomorrow, aren't we?
yeah, I was
Yes.
going to say, hopefully all of you can also come tomorrow to our monthly meeting. That'll be very much about marketing and who we should try to interview for the book. Hopefully it won't be technical discussions of what the book should be. That's what these meetings are for. But let's see what we can make happen.
All right.
All
I'll be
right,
there tomorrow.
fantastic. Look forward
Thank
to
you.
it. Bye, guys. Thanks
Have
for
a good
today.
day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.